North Korea threatening. They say they intend to reduce South Korea to ashes. Now, the North Korean military warning it will soon launch special actions against South Korea. What is North Korea plotting? And is the United States also at risk? Former UN Ambassador John Bolton joins us. Good evening, sir.
Glad to be here.
Care to guess what special actions mean?
Well, this is part of the script North Korea uses. You mentioned reducing Seoul to ashes. Probably tomorrow we'll wake up and hear they've threatened to launch a sea of fire against South Korea. That's one of their favorites, too. I think when you combine this with other evidence of preparation for a third nuclear test, the failure of the missile launch on Kim Il-sung's birthday, 100th anniversary of his birth, that the evidence now begins to point to a third nuclear test. And South Korea has been warning about that for a while. So I suspect this rhetoric may be preparation for the happy day when they light off their third nuclear device.
All right, you know, we sort of this happens often, and so none of us are particularly alarmed each time. But at some point, sometime, there's a possibility it could be bad. Well, I mean, they launched a rocket a couple years ago, and everyone in the world sort of laughed at it. So their reaction was to do a nuclear test, and we didn't laugh then.
Yeah, well, what they're clearly trying to do is get a nuclear device that's small enough and light enough to put on top of whatever ballistic missile they can get to last in flight longer than 90 seconds. On the other side, they're trying to perfect their ballistic missile program. And the aim is to have a deliverable nuclear weapon. It's exactly the same thing that Iran is doing. I think they've been collaborating for quite some time, certainly on the missile side, and I think on the nuclear side. This is not just a little dictatorship in Northeast Asia. This is a global proliferation threat.
Well, the Seoul is not that far from the border. Number one,
it's right on,
right
it, really.
there, right, and we've got 30,000 soldiers there. So this is potentially at some point extremely dangerous.
I think it's why our military on the Korean Peninsula are always worried about these threats, because the northern suburbs of Seoul are within easy range of North Korean artillery that we have believed for some time is stocked with chemical warheads. So forget the nuclear side for a minute. The civilians in South Korea are potentially very vulnerable to the irrational behavior of the North Koreans.
So what's the deterrence? I mean, can they intercept one of those missiles, or is it after the fact that which is way too late, is when we suddenly move in and take a military action if that's indeed what happens? But I mean, what protection does Seoul have now?
Well, the main protection is the readiness of both South Korean and American troops who have trained and trained and trained for the eventuality they will have to cross the DMZ and go toward Pyongyang to protect Seoul.
But that's after the chemical weapons.
Well, that's one scenario. The other is, though, that if there were regime collapse in North Korea, which I still think is entirely possible, that we would want to get in before they lost control of the nuclear weapons to try and stabilize the situation, to prevent Seoul from coming under attack, and to prevent massive flows of literally up to millions of refugees into South Korea and China.
What's your theory why they always warn or say that they're going to do this? I mean, I realize after the fact, their atmospheric tests, you can tell if a nuclear weapon is tested, but why do they tell us? Why do you think they keep warning, and with very hostile terms, provocative, like reduced to ashes?
Well, I think part of it is for domestic consumption, and I think against the background of the failed missile test, there's an imperative here in the minds of many of them not to mess it up again. One advantage of a nuclear test, while they might be tempted to take the press down the tunnel with them to see the explosion, is that it's a lot harder to cover up. It's a lot harder to know whether the test has been a real success or failure than watching a missile that blows up after 90 seconds. And so the idea of a third nuclear test could give them a success going forward that could overcome, in their minds, some of the propaganda embarrassment of having the missile fail.
And China, meanwhile, which probably, at least I think, is the most muscle with them,
doing nothing.
Doing
really.
nothing.
But something very significant. The Defense Secretary Panetta testified to Congress in response to questions about Chinese assistance to the North Korean missile program. Essentially said the other day that there was evidence of assistance. He obviously didn't want to be specific in public, but we've seen pictures of that truck on which the North Koreans paraded another ICBM. And for years, China's been saying, no, we're not assisting anything with respect to the nuclear ballistic missile programs. Not true now, by by the admission of Defense Secretary Panetta. That's very significant.
Which is worse than them doing nothing, which I was critical of them of not helping. Now they're actually assisting them.
Yeah. Now the argument will be, oh well, that's some rogue company off by itself, and it was actually they sold it as a truck to haul logs, or they've got some excuse for it. China controls everything that goes across that border. If they want to stop it, they could stop it. So I actually view this as a very serious matter.
And the Obama administration's policy on this is what?
Is to go and beg China to allow its currency to appreciate. We have no China policy. That's the worst part of it. The Chinese are building up their conventional and ballistic missile and nuclear capabilities, very assertive in the East and South China Sea and territorial claims. They're doing all kinds of things economically to disadvantage foreign investors, and our response is essentially to do nothing.
Ambassador, thank you, sir.
Thank you.